that was the impetus behind the tax credit program back in the 2000s. So that roughly ran to 2000. I was
Wow.
heavily involved in that as well. So myself and a couple partners, we had a venture fund that was investing in these qualified technology businesses. You know, those were the good days of raising a fund. Brian, if you can imagine, you could go to an LP and say, well, you could pay state taxes or you could give me your money and I'll invest it for
Yeah.
you.
I'll
It's
go
a
invest that in some
no-brainer.
startups. Yeah.
Right? It was a no-brainer. But I think there was some negatives to, that program, right? In a sense, it almost made the money too easy to come by.
Yeah.
And so you had a lot of folks who, were getting ahead of themselves, overspending, expanding too quickly.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're delighted to have Chenoa Farnsworth on the program. She's the managing partner for Blue Startups Hawaii. And we met at the Venture Summit West and really hit it off, and I wanted to have you on the program as soon as possible. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Aloha.
Aloha. And for those that don't know, I used to live in Hawaii, so it was like a very special thing. And Renata, my wife, worked at a tech startup in Hawaii back when they had I don't know if they still have this, the big tax giveaway for state income tax for tech startups.
They don't. It sunsetted in 2010. Yeah.
Oh, 2010. Okay. This is like 2009, 8. So
yeah,
they really benefit. It was like a dollar for dollar tax credit. I think it was 100% tax credit if you had enough state income liability, mainly kind of a give out to corporations, I think. But
those were the good old days.
but it started a lot of tech startups, including the one my wife, Renata, worked at. So, but would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Yeah. So, I've been here in Hawaii for most of my adult life. I actually moved here when I was a kid from the Bay Area. So most of my career has been here, and most of it, believe it or not, has been in tech in Hawaii, which most people really don't think those two go together. But I'm here fighting the good fight and trying to make it happen.
I love that. And, I'm sure so many founders would love to be in Hawaii. I'm sure you did you get an influx during COVID where a lot of people are like, I'm just going to go work remote from Hawaii?
We did. We got a big influx in COVID, and, we'll kind of see what the end result of that is. I like to say the jury's still out a little bit on kind of how that impacts the ecosystem here. And I think it's, of course, a positive from where I stand, like in the tech industry, because it's an influx of talent and experience and a lot of things that we didn't have before. But of course, there's, a flip side to that. There are people who feel like, we've been invaded and are concerned about things like rising housing prices and, all of the kind of socio-economic impact. So I guess I see it kind of as my job to harness this talent and direct it towards, more economic activity here in the state. And that would be a good outcome, as opposed to just an extractive. We want it to be an additive kind of outcome here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was kind of the intention behind the tax credit, 15 years ago or whatever it was now. Like, hey, maybe we can get a tech sector kind of going here. You got your real estate, you got your banking, you got your retail, military. Yeah. Like you got these like big industries there, but there's not enough diversification. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And that was the impetus behind the tax credit program back in the 2000s. So that roughly ran 2000 to 2010. I was heavily involved in that as well. So myself and a couple partners, we had a venture fund that was investing in these qualified technology businesses. Those were the good days of raising a fund. Brian, if you can imagine, you could go to an LP and say, well, you could pay state taxes or you could give me your money and I'll invest it for you.
I'll go invest that in some startups. Yeah.
Right? It was a no-brainer. But I think there was some negatives to, that program, right? In a sense, it almost made the money too easy to come by. Yeah. And so you had a lot of folks who, were getting ahead of themselves, overspending, expanding too quickly. There's that old adage of like, there's two things that kill a startup, not enough money and too much money. So we kind of had that too much money problem. So we were getting away from the true market conditions that are important. And then I think of kind of what we're doing now as the second wave of trying to build a tech industry here, which is based around kind of the accelerator market. So the state put up a grant back in 2013 to start some accelerators here. We were one of the first recipients of that and put up the first tech-based accelerator here. But there are other accelerators here as well in other industries. And so that's kind of the second wave, I think of it. And I'm, of course, because this is where I'm sitting now and I'm running an accelerator, I think that has more legs and is a little bit more of an organic growth process as opposed to kind of a top-down, like, let us give you millions of dollars. This is like, okay, we're going to give you $25,000, and we'll see how you can.
Well, it's like subsidizing a bunch of farm equipment. They're like, well, we don't even know where like the farms are going to be, and we don't know what we're planting, and we have no irrigation infrastructure. But like you're sending like tractors onto dirt lots, and you're like, what? It's like dump trucks full of cash are backing up onto these farms that aren't built yet. And
totally. And now we're kind of like planting seeds, know, and we'll see what grows. And of course, there are challenges and setbacks, but there's also progress and, some bright lights, that have been shining over this last decade, I'll say, from that kind of accelerator approach.
Yeah. Well, let's go back and talk about how you got into venture capital initially, and then we'll kind of skip ahead towards the current state.
Yeah. I mean, like I think all kind of whatever paths are meandering, in these things. I didn't set out to be a venture capitalist. I didn't go to business school and say, okay, I'm going to be a VC, but I did go to business school. And prior to that, I was working in health administration and health policy, a completely different career. And I went to business school thinking I was going to be in a health administration. How boring. And, and then during business school was the first .com boom. And even though we were all the way out here in Hawaii, there was some small ripple effect of that boom.
You went to like Manoa there? Or?
Yeah, University of Hawaii. And so, I kind of got fascinated by what was happening in Silicon Valley and what was happening in tech, and started working with a couple local tech startups here. And basically it was like, wow, this is where the fun is at, like these people are having way more fun than like the health policy nerds I was hanging out with before. So I basically shifted my whole career and started working on startups. So I did that for about 10 years. I worked at a series of different startups and helped different startups as a consultant, and, none of which became the next Google, of course, but, gave me some valuable experience. And then essentially what happened is another colleague of mine moved here from the mainland, and he had experience with angel investing. And we met, and he said, hey, I want to put together an angel group here in Hawaii. That did not exist. And I said, great, I'll help you, because I could see the utility and how that would help my clients at the time. I had a bunch of startups that I was working with at that point. So, we got together and we formed Hawaii Angels. That was the first kind of step in the process. And then we put a fund together that was kind of a sidecar fund to the Angels called the Heaven Fund. And then when the tax credit program got underway, we had our tax equity fund called Kalahala. So that's kind of how I got into it.
And you had to probably qualify the LPs. Do you have enough state income tax where?
I mean, we took their word for it. What we had to qualify were the investments. So the investments had to meet certain criteria, right? They had to be what was called a qualified high-tech business at QHTV. And that's, again, where some of the trouble came in. We were investing in tech companies, but other folks were using the law to invest in movies, which qualified. And also some of the mainstay companies here, corporations, were kind of like spinning out their tech teams and trying to get them qualified. Our IT department is now its own, company.
Startup,
so that they could get, so there was a lot of manipulation of the law, and we, it definitely kind of got away from the initial intent, which was to get a tech industry jump started here.
Yeah. So Renata was at Blue Wave Technologies. You remember Blue Wave?
Yep.
Yeah, and claims insurance. Yeah, she ran marketing there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was, a lot of kind of activity like that. So, when that law sunsetted in 2010, and that kind of coincided with, the economic downturn, 08 or 09, it was like, okay, what are we doing now? It was some dark days. There was not much deal flow. There was not much investment activity in any part of the sectors, be it angel or VC. So it was kind of, the accelerators really kind of helped get things going again, kind of kickstart the industry again.
Tell us about Hawaii Angel. So you founded that group, and is it still going? And how are you guys working together on that? Yeah.
It's still going strong. Almost, I think we're coming up on like 22, 23 years. So we're actually one of the older groups in the country, one of the founding members of the American, Angel Association, the ACA. So, that was really great to be involved in kind of the genesis of the angel investing scene in the United States. And my partner and I were very active in that scene and the ACA. And so, that's been a steady group. I took over management of the group in like 2009, I want to say. And I just recently stepped down. So yay. I'm still on the board. I'm still an active investor, but I'm no longer managing the group. We found another sucker to take that on.
Here, you'd be great at this. Yeah. I know how that works.
Exactly. It only took us 3 years to like wear him down. Like, hey, how about you? He's like, no. We're like, hey, how about you? No. And finally he said yes. I was like, let's go. Anyway, very capable hands, younger hands, which I think is important for kind of the next gen. But it's a very consistent group. We meet once a month. We invest in deals every month, and put together, put money to work here and outside of Hawaii as well. So we look at deals inside Hawaii and outside Hawaii. About 75% of the deals are Hawaii based, but the other, deals come from outside, usually with, some point of connection, right? We have a member that's,
right.
Cousin started this or whatever, or they're investing in it themselves personally.
I'm curious, what year, at what point did it switch over to mostly Zoom? Was it before COVID, or because you guys are way out in Hawaii, or were people like started flying out there like, I'll like fly to Hawaii for present to you? Or?
Yeah, exactly. So of course, during COVID, we switched to Zoom, but we've gone back to in-person 100%.
Wow.
And if you are coming from the mainland to pitch, we require that you get on a plane. We don't do any Zoom pitches. Wow. Yeah, we have just found that it's not effective for our group. They just simply won't make investments without having some personal contact.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I've ever met a founder before I invested in them. Maybe once or twice out of 125 portfolio companies now, in person.
Yeah.
I run everything on Zoom.
Yeah.
Podcasts, cameras, everything. It's like all virtual now.
Yeah.
Sitting in my pajamas below the fold here.
Yeah. And I guess, we're kind of the opposite. Like, of course, we were forced into that for both Blue Startups and Hawaii Angels during COVID. And frankly, I hated it. I like to say it was all of the work and none of the fun to be working virtually for me. I just didn't like it. And interestingly, I thought too, with regards to Blue Startups, especially that cohort, I'll call it COVID cohort, has underperformed all our other cohorts. And I do think there's some magic to the person-to-person and the peer-to-peer, primarily kind of relationship that builds in a cohort where you're actually in person. Yeah. And, we run relatively small cohorts, so up to 10 companies. So the founders are, and it's a pretty intense environment. It is in person.
Well, let's switch to the Blue Startups kind of, what was the inception of that?
Mm-hmm.
You guys have been at it now for 12 years.
Yeah.
Walk us through the evolution of that, the origin story, and what you've changed over the years, maybe.
Yeah. So, as I was mentioning, kind of there was these dark days, if we'll call it, where there wasn't a lot happening, and our leadership team at Hawaii Angels was kind of sitting around going, okay, well, what are we, what are we going to do to get this engine up and running again? Should we shut the group down? I mean, we were thinking about that, or, what else could we do? And as I mentioned, the state had put up this RFP for accelerator operators. And so we were thinking about it at Hawaii Angels, should we apply? And we were putting together a plan to apply. At the same time, and current partners who are the owners of the Tetris company. Yes, that game.
The Tetris, yeah.
The Tetris.
Or at least outside of Russia or something like that, right? Is the origin story
there?
Watch
the movie. Watch the movie for the whole story. But
I think I remember this story because, I was involved with Sierra Club and Sustainability Association and a bunch of sustainability and solar things when I was there. And I remember Hank being around. And I even probably met him once or twice,
Yeah, and still that is his passion. He is a climate change activist. That's what he does all day, every day now. But back in the day, they actually moved the Tetris company here to take advantage of the tax credit program when it was.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And then
so basically they could operate here basically state income tax free.
Yeah, I mean, really, they didn't end up taking advantage of it as much as they thought they would. But once they had moved the company here, they realized this is a great place for them to be. Tetris is a licensing company, and their two biggest markets are Japan and the U.S. So being here in this time zone made sense for them from a business perspective. And Hank has roots here as well. So he went to the University of Hawaii for a bit. He didn't graduate, but he was there for a while before he moved to Japan. So the Tetris folks, Hank and Maya, Maya's his daughter, who currently runs the Tetris business, they were also thinking about applying to this accelerator grant opportunity simply because they had extra space in their office. And Hank's idea was, let's just throw some entrepreneurs in there and let them work, and Maya kind of said, well, Dad, there's a little more to it than that. Like we could do a full accelerator program.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we all knew each other. This is a small town. So we started talking together about doing this together. And so we joined forces and and then started Blue Startups.
That's amazing. So what, how did the first, are you guys investing out of funds for Blue Startups? And what fund number are you on? How is that first fundraise of an accelerator fund? And you had the angel network, so you probably got some checks from that network. You got some money from the state. Talk about the kind of the financial side of the origin story.
Yeah. So we are currently on Fund 4. We're raising Fund 4 right now. Wow. And that first fund, yes, we had the anchor tenant was the state of Hawaii. So the state has supported us basically in two different ways, through grant funding for the operations of Blue Startups and as an LP in Blue Ventures, which is the venture fund. So that was kind of our anchor tenant to get started. And yes, the remainder was funded primarily through Hawaii Angels, high net worth individuals. That's how we got the first fund off the ground. I think actually the first fundraise was relatively easy. The second fundraise, we had a lot of steam coming in on that. So that was easy. We had some big wins in the first fund. And the third fund was the slog. That was
what year did that close?
2019.
Okay. So that late 2010s kind of slog. Third fund. Well, the third fund kind of becomes okay, what have you done in the first two funds?
Yeah. And though we had a strong track record, but we didn't have a lot of cash on cash returns, that kind of thing.
You didn't have a lot of DPI. So they're like, where's your DPI? And we're like, we got a lot of markups.
Yeah.
Well, I can't eat markups.
Yeah. So going into the third fund was definitely the hardest raise of them.
So what years were those? So 2012 was the first one, and then call it 2015 second.
2013 really was the first one, and then 2015, and then 2019, and now we're raising Fund 4. Fund 4 is going relatively smooth, just because Fund 3 performed very well.
Nice.
So we had that to kind of fundraise off of. which is great.
What do you find that LPs look at when you don't have DPI? Are you kind of trying to tell the story of like, hey, look at all the markups. We have a bunch of cap-adjusted markups here. I mean, if they all exited right now, we'd have a pretty awesome IRR, and you're kind of telling that story.
Yeah. And we had, even though we didn't have a good DPI going into that fund 3, we had some really strong companies, and, kind of well-known companies, even nationally. So, that I think gave us a lot of credibility, and then, like I said, this fundraise is relatively easy, again, just because of the performance of Fund 3.
Well, you can look back at 12 years now of info, right? Like what have we done over 12? How big was, how many companies in each fund?
So, we basically, we just invest until we're, out of money, essentially. We have reserves for follow-on funding. So the way that we invest is tranched. So we do very small first checks, $25K. But then we continue to double down on those companies.
For milestones.
And mostly based on additional fundraises. So, we only put in 50 at the next raise, 100 at the next raise, and so on and so on.
Love it. Is there a $25K kind of standard deal, kind of like what like Founder University does or Launch, or is there?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a negotiation, it's not like, a hard and fast, but we're looking for 2 to 5% of every company that we go into,
Initially.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Because we're also asking for equity for the program. I mean, putting them through 12 weeks of intensive programming and access to our network.
There's a real cost to that as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And do you ask for any money up front, or is it all just, hey, we're going to give you $25K, and if you hit these milestones and raise more, we're going to keep putting money into you and run you through the 12-week thing? But you also have to, I assume, move to Hawaii. You can't do it virtually, right?
That's right. So the program is 12 weeks. We do 8 weeks in person. The rest is online. And then we do 1 week in San Francisco. So that's kind of the capstone program, if you will. So we bring all the companies there. And we invest in about a 50-50 ratio of Hawaii companies and non-Hawaii companies. So,
but the agreement is like, hey, for 8 weeks, you got to be boots on the ground here in Honolulu.
That's right.
And they're like, that sounds great. Depending on their age
most
and
people
family
don't have
situation.
a problem with it. Yeah.
It sounds great. Do you know where I can get a surf lesson? What percentage of the 50%, come to Hawaii and go, you know what? We're just going to stay here.
Yeah. None so far.
Okay.
Honestly.
Wow.
That when we started the program, we really thought that would happen. And that was part of the intention.
I'm surprised. I would have thought, if you would have asked me, what do you think? And I've been like 5-10%, and end up just staying a couple months ago. And you know what? We'll just run it from here.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally we have folks that like hire here and have operations here, right? That kind of thing. But in terms of moving the entire company here, no. And, I've kind of given up on that dream. Like I just go, well, if you can hire here, that's great. And we try to do a lot to kind of make that happen in terms of introductions and job boards. And, we're always trying to match up kind of local talent to our companies, even if the companies are not local, so that we're hiring local. But also, as you know, today in tech, I mean, every team is a distributed team at this point. So
100%.
It's almost irrelevant, I hate to say. And I don't want my state funders to hear that, because of course they're all about like building jobs. And I'm like, yeah, but
well, they are indirectly. I mean, some are, probably coming back and
and certainly the money is coming through here. Like, I mean, one of our most kind of successful companies, a company called Turno, is here. They were born here and they're still here.
Wow.
Have about 120 employees, I think, at last count. But 100 of those are in Brazil and Argentina.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Which is typical.
And that's an unfortunate reality in the internet age. I mean, Team Ignite basically made up of a bunch of part-timers, geographically dispersed all over the place, and contractors all over the place.
Right.
I have contractors on a bunch of different countries that work on a variety of things for Team Ignite, including the podcast. And
Yeah.
I think it's just and I'm sitting here 45 minutes east of Sacramento, pretty far away from civilization, right on the edge of civilization, right before the internet stops working. And it didn't even work that well when I moved in, by the way. But so how many companies are in the portfolio? Like, what's your rate of follow on, all that stuff? Give me all the numbers.
Yeah. So we've invested in 121 companies.
Oh.
In terms of the follow on, you can think of it as kind of this stepwise function. I like to say, it's about 50% drop off at each step. So, about 50% of our companies get to that next check.
Yeah.
50% get to the next check.
So it's like, okay, so it's like 25 for the 2 to 5%. So call it $1 million to $3 million valuation.
Yeah.
This is kind of the accelerator round. What do you really call the pre-seed?
Yeah.
You call it the angel round or the friends and family round or the accelerator round. They're all kind of like in the same stage of the company, this 1.5 cap, 2 cap kind of stuff.
Right.
Usually they have like an MVP, some working demo.
Yeah.
Usually no revenue, maybe some unpaid
maybe
users or
some early revenue, but yeah.
And what's the next step? That 50% reach it. That would be the pre-seed. I got to, the traditional 750K, million and a half at a 5 to 10 cap kind of thing. And I got some real revenue. That's where we like to invest. That's kind of like, you've been through the accelerator. You've proved that people want the thing.
Yeah.
Somewhat de-risked a little bit. Because those 50% add up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So that's definitely kind of that next phase. And, precisely, I would call it an angel round typically, or maybe, a very early stage VC is interested in that kind of deal. And we see both basically happening. Yeah. That's our job, to kind of get them in front of that next,
that's your success metric, right? That's probably what LPs are asking you. Great. Like, okay, give me your MOIC and your TVPI and your DPI and all that stuff. But also, what percentage of your graduates that go through your program raise a pre-seed or a seed?
Right. So, exactly.
And how does that compare to industry norms?
Right. I mean, so our first metric is survivability, right? How many of these companies are still alive? So that's the first thing that we look at.
Out of 121, like how many are still operating? I guess
we're at about 65% of those
over 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, better than norm, right, in terms of survivability.
Yeah.
And then follow-on funding is the next metric we look at. So our companies have raised in total about $500 million in follow-on funding, including an IPO, that was in there. And on average, right, those companies are going on to raise about $500,000 about within 6 months of the program. So that's kind of the metrics that we look at.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then if you think about the, all of the universe of accelerators, I assume you guys are the only one in Hawaii.
We're the only one in technology. Yeah.
In tech.
There are some other, different sectors.
Oh, okay.
Here. Yeah. So there's an aquaculture accelerator, for example. There's a CPG accelerator. What else? There's a kind of an impact accelerator.
Oh, okay.
Social entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Accelerator. Yeah. Things like that.
That's really cool. For the founders out there, of which there's tens of thousands probably listening at some point in the future, why come to Hawaii and do this versus one of the tech stars or the 500 or obviously YC. If you get into YC, you probably go to YC, but all the other ones,
I get that question a lot. Well, if I get into YC, why should I go to Blue Startups? I'm like, well,
go to YC.
You got into YC.
You got into YC, yeah. I got into Harvard. Should I go there or should I go to the state college down here?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I put it. I mean, we're a very good state school.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of, if that's where you're at, or a great option. There are a few sectors that I think we are, expert in and can, really be helpful. So travel and tourism technologies is one. We have a great track record there. We have a strong portfolio there. So there's a lot of, kind of that peer-to-peer networking as well. They help each other a lot of the folks in the travel space. And so that, I think we have some unfair advantage. Obviously, Hawaii has a big tourism industry that we can leverage to get your product into market and all of that good stuff. So that's one. Sustainability is another one because of, who Hank is kind of on the global stage with regards to climate change issues, his connections. And of course, it's something that we want to affect change in if we can find the right fits there. We're talking primarily software. We're not talking about, renewable energy projects.
Venture backable businesses, in other words. Yeah. It has to be scalable.
And not capital intensive. We don't do capital intensive businesses. We're not set up for that. You got to be able to get somewhere on 25K, right? So,
right.
We're not doing nuclear fusion over here.
Like, great. You got a couple co-founders and 25K only gets you so far,
Yeah, exactly. And then we do also a bit of gaming related software. So
Hawaii historically has had a kind of a gaming. I mean, you had Tetris, obviously, but there's been some other studios or work that's done there.
Square was here most famously for many years. In fact, right here in this building. Yeah. So, and then there's a lot in the creative markets here in terms of film and script writing, things like that.
They've just filmed so much there that it would make sense that some people just kind of set up shop there, and there's an ecosystem there.
Yeah, so there is a pretty a robust ecosystem in the creative fields here. But so we do, again, because of Tetris, we think we have some unfair advantage there that we can be helpful. We have a lot of connections in the gaming industry. We don't do gaming studios per se that would, potentially compete with Tetris, but esports we've done and, other kind of things, software products and gaming engine kind of product, that sort of thing. So,
how has, I'm curious, now that you're going to go to Fund 4, and how has your thesis or what you look at, or tell us about some of the mistakes you guys have made and corrected over the years? And I've certainly made a bunch, and I can tell you mine, but how has that shifted over 10 years of doing it? That's a long time. I've only been doing this for, about 5.
I know.
A ton of mistakes. 10 years is a long time.
It is a long time. And I would say that really what's interesting, I think, to me is we haven't changed that much in 10 years. We did definitely start with a few kind of ideas, right? Tech in Hawaii, that was kind of the main overarching umbrella there. And then we also, as partners, sat down and said, okay, what's unique to Hawaii? And we kind of zeroed in on this thesis of East meets West, right? We're the only place in the United States that is this close to Asia, both in terms of, geography, but also more importantly, culturally, right? We have a huge Asian immigrant population here. It's a huge part of our just daily existence and culture. So we started with that premise, right? We're the place where East meets West.
Yeah.
We work with Asian companies that want to get into the U.S. market. We'll work with U.S. companies who want to get in the Asian market, et cetera. And we have done a lot of that. And we also host a big event every year called East meets West. So
I think I've heard of that event.
I was going to say very many people in the startup world have heard of East meets West, even if they haven't heard of startups.
Yeah, that's funny. I think I've definitely seen that event around. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're the ones who produced that event, and it has, of course, evolved and grown into a life of its own.
Well, now I have another excuse to fly to Hawaii.
Absolutely. A great excuse. This is why I love to give everybody this excuse. Come to Hawaii for East meets West.
When is it?
Next year will be April 2025. So April 24th and 25th, 2025.
Oh wow, that's my so my 2 oldest sons and my wife are 3 days in a row in late April. 26th, 27th, 28th.
See, you can give them a trip to Hawaii. You come out and speak at East meets West and then stay for the weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure my teenage boys would love that. Hey, we're going to skip you hanging out with your friends and go to Hawaii.
It's Hawaii. They'll love Hawaii. No matter what.
It. My first son was born there in Kailua at what's the with the C?
Castle.
Thank you.
Castle. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, East meets West has been a great forum for that. We can bring together entrepreneurs and investors from both sides of the Pacific. We say, we've been building on that thesis for 10 years. And I would say, it's still a work in progress. We're finally seeing some kind of more tangible traction there. So last year, for example, we had a contract with JETRO, which is the Japanese External Trade Organization, to run a program for them for Japanese startups here as well. So mostly virtual, but they also did some time in Hawaii. That was really successful. So kind of bringing, again, more entrepreneurs from both sides of the Pacific to kind of build here is a concept that we're still working towards. I think that's been a work in progress. But what has, I think, surprised us, has been more the travel and tourism space. We didn't set out to kind of make that a focus, but what we discovered along the way was that, we are seeing really good deal flow in that space from our local entrepreneurs because it's what they are exposed to. So they, it's what they are innovating in, right? And, there's some really great things about it for us also in that there's not a lot of pressure for those companies to move. They can build a big business right here, and then they can also export from here their technology. But, they don't get a lot of that, like, why are you in Hawaii, kind of stuff that our kind of mainstay SaaS companies get, right? This kind of prejudice against, like, oh, what are you doing there? You must not be serious, is kind of the implication. So, we've really leaned into that space just because we've seen success there.
That's interesting. Any other lessons in 10 years?
Oh, boy.
Maybe for people looking to start an accelerator, of which I've talked to quite a few.
Yeah. Don't do it. No.
A lot of work, right?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Way easier just to write a check and have somebody on your podcast.
Way easier. Yeah. But, I also love it. Like, I love the people part of it.
Yeah.
Getting to know people. It's funny because when you're in cohort, I'm just every day like, I can't wait for this to be over. Like, oh my gosh. And then as soon as it's over, I'm like, oh, I can't, I'm sad.
When's the next one starting? I
yeah,
already missed it.
Yeah. Starting. Like,
was it like 4 a year roughly, or?
We only do 1 a year.
Oh, really? It's only one a year. Wow.
Yeah. When we started, we were doing 2 a year.
Yeah.
And it's just too much. We have a small team. And also because of East Meets West, which is kind of its whole own program, if you think about
so you got that in the spring, and then what you do in the cohorts in the fall then?
Yeah, exactly. So we're
6 months apart. Yeah.
Switching gears, essentially. So those are the two kind of halves of our business really at this point.
Yeah.
So we only run once a year. But yeah, you kind of miss it and you love it. And I love the people part of it. And
that's why I do the podcast, actually. It's just to talk to really interesting people.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have so many great founders and VCs, and I know, and I'm like, I'll just have a podcast and just shoot the shit with them and learn stuff and share with the world. And
so I get to do that, with a new group of founders every year, and feel like you're actually making an impact, on their trajectory. So I think that's really great. And it does 10 years in, I can say it's gotten easier, of course there's a learning curve and all of that. But eventually you figure some stuff out and you have some systems in place, right? And it becomes just like any other business, a replicable kind of repeatable business. And that gets easier,
Yeah. So what kind of trends are you following right now in tech? What are you looking forward to in the future going forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think obviously the big one is AI. I wish I had something more interesting to tell you.
What is that? I've been pronouncing it I. I'm sure.
But yeah, that's what's happening, obviously. And, it's an interesting time, right? It's hard to kind of separate, the wheat from the chaff, or whatever you would want to say.
Yeah. I'm really bullish on a verticalized AI applications. I've been building AI now for over a decade and helping lots of AI startups scale. And I saw this 10 years ago. It's really the verticalized applications where a lot of the values created. Foundational models now, obviously, I wouldn't invest in that. I wouldn't invest in that when I, 4 or 5 years ago, because I knew it was like it's very, very hard to compete there. There's going to
Yeah.
be one winner, maybe two, and it's going to probably be the incumbents, and that's what it's looking like at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd hate
Exactly.
to be on Anthropic's like cap table right now. You know, I doubt they're going to exit for more than the lick pref on the cap table.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there's lots of unicorns, B2B SaaS, AI unicorns that you've probably never heard of, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then there's going to be a lot that just disappear overnight. And I think that's the scary part about it, right?
I'm
Is
seeing a lot of this in my portfolio, though. It's kind of a weird thing where why I like B2B SaaS so much is
Mhm.
I almost never see a B2B SaaS company go out of business and just give up. It's always like they're kind of walking dead for a while, and then they just sort of sell for a pittance. But usually, if you're a B2B SaaS company, you can usually figure out new ways to grow, new problems to solve for your customer base, new
Right.
verticals, new whatever, if you're a good enough founder.
Yeah, unless, you run out of money and you're starving and you have to eat. So that can
Well,
happen.
yeah, unless so that's why we only invest in, companies that have 20 or 30K of MRR.
Yeah.
I think you're on your accelerator and it's pre-launch, it's a whole different ball of
Yeah.
wax, right? But like
Yeah.
for us, it's like they're kind of default to live already. As long
Yeah.
as they don't run the burn into a wall, kind of
Yeah.
a great place to be. It's kind of a very privileged spot. What about what's the kind of the long-term, 5 or 10 years for you guys? What's that vision look like?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. And I
I love that answer. You could have just
yeah,
came up with something.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope that we'll be around,
Yeah.
If you had told me 10 years ago we'd be around in 10 years, I would have said, no
Like really
way.
fun for
Yeah.
2024? Really? Yeah.
So now I'm kind of like, well, shoot, maybe we just keep this thing going as long as we can, basically. And I don't see any real reason to stop.
Yeah.
And I don't even see any real reason to pivot or do something dramatically different. I mean, obviously there are things that I think would help us grow our business and kind of partnerships like what we did with Jetro last year. I think those kinds of things, continue to put Hawaii more on the map. And that's important to us, and continue to grow, East meets West. I think that still has even more potential that hasn't been uncovered. So there's, a lot of kind of, I guess, more of the same.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we switch to a rapid fire to wrap up?
Okay.
Which is not really rapid, by the way, I realized, but it ends up it's like conversation starters. What's the first thing you do in the morning?
Drink tea.
What kind of tea?
Black tea.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you like an early riser, like a typical Hawaiian, like you get up at
No.
night owl?
I mean, I'm neither. Is that fair? I go to bed early and wake up late.
I remember people in Hawaii wake up at like 5, 6 in the morning.
Yeah,
right?
my husband does.
Yeah.
He wakes up very early, and I'm usually still like,
It's a hard place to sleep in though, because all the birds in the morning. And,
yeah. I mean, I'm up by 6. Let's be fair, but I like to take it slow. I'm not like a get out of bed person. I'm like, I'm gonna drink my tea, check my phone.
I get out of bed just in time to jump on my first call. And I'm usually like really groggy. I'm like, hey, I'm Brian.
Yeah.
Early awake.
Typically, I'll go for a walk every morning. And I live on Wilhelmina Rise. I don't know if you know where that is, but like it's a hill like this.
We used to live in Sierra Drive, so
Yeah.
up at the park where the basketball court is.
Yep. Yeah.
46.
I walk that hill.
Yeah.
Every morning from bottom to top.
That's amazing. So I used to work at the Beal Corp. Corey Beal.
Really?
If you know Corey.
Corey is one of my husband's best friends.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, you'll have to tell him you're on my podcast. So I worked for Corey.
So funny.
I was his very first employee back in 2008 when he kind of struck out on his own. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So I was in that little office with them in Kaimuki, and
yeah,
the coffee shop was there in the corner, and then they had the really great burrito place that did the California style burritos. I don't know.
Not anymore. Yeah, I can't remember what it's
called.
called.
Is that the Thai?
It's still there.
Oh, that's a good restaurant.
Yeah, but literally the Beals are like some of our best friends.
And that's amazing. Joanna and the kids are getting older now, right? They're off to college.
Exact same age as my kids. So Becca's my my daughter Ellie, and Cooper's the same age
That is
as
so
my son.
wild. That's so wild.
Yeah.
So you'll have to tell him hello from me, and
Yeah, I will.
that's so funny. Yeah, but I connected with Brian. He's like a VC now, and I was on his podcast. That's amazing.
That's how Hawaii is. It's a small world.
It really is. Yeah, Corey, special place in my heart. Worked for him for 3 years. In a different universe, I'm just still chilling in Hawaii, like working on real estate.
Yeah. It's not a bad life.
It's not a bad life. I wanted more though. I thought, I kind of wanted to come to back. When we had our first kid, we're like, well, do we want to raise our kids here, or do we see our kids like kind of going to like California UC schools? And we had a bunch of family in California as well, so it's kind of like once you have that first kid, it's like you have to kind of make the decision. Where's the family? Where's the support? And we kind of made the decision to come back, but we still go back every twice a year. And I haven't seen Corey for years, actually. I think
he's exactly the same.
Yeah, he's a character. Yeah,
he's exactly the same.
That's funny. What's your favorite book on entrepreneurship?
I mean, that's a good question. I think the book that influenced me the most, perhaps in starting at least this chapter, Building Startup Communities, Brad Feld's book, which is a pretty OG book. It's not really about entrepreneurship so much as it is about building startup communities in places that, don't necessarily have them. So that's going back to kind of the Boulder thesis, they call it, right? What kind of magic ingredients did they put together to create a strong ecosystem in Boulder?
This is the Techstars community, or
the Techstars, and I mean that's where Techstars started. That's where Foundry Group, which is Brad Feld's fund, started.
Is this the startup community way?
I think it was called Building or Startup Communities. Yeah, Startup Communities.
Okay.
Building Startup Communities.
Oh, I see it now. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I that was like my Bible when I started Blue Startups. It's like, okay, I'm going to do everything that Brad Feld tells me to do. Yeah. So
that's really cool.
Big influence.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
I don't know. I guess the one that pops into my head is fake it till you make it, because I think, everyone, right, experiences this imposter syndrome from time to time. And you just kind of have to tell yourself that's a universal and that's okay. I'm just going to fake my way through this, and like many other people do, and I'm not going to feel bad about it.
I love that. My grandma used to say that all the time. Well, just fake it till you make it, Bri.
Fake it till you make it.
And it's great. It's a great piece of advice. And I've had that imposter syndrome over and over and over in my career. If you don't actually feel like you're faking it until you make it, you're probably not trying hard enough.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're not failing, like when I started investing other people's money, when I started my syndicate, I was like, oh my God, this is so nerve-wracking, right?
It's scary, right?
It's scary.
Yeah. It still keeps me up at night, and I've been doing it for a long time. And every once in a while, I'll wake up and be like, "That guy, he gave me $100,000. Oh my God!" I hope.
I have friends in my funds and friends in all my syndicated deals, and I'm Corey hasn't invested though.
No, well, he hasn't invested in me either, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, he's so conservative with real estate.
Yeah, he did invest with me back in the 221 days when there was tax credits involved.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I was doing a bunch of entrepreneurial stuff when I was there, and I was way more into like solar. I was like director of energy policy for Sierra Club and all this stuff. And I was flipping all these homes off the courthouse steps. This is like 2008-9. And he's like, I'd love to see you apply some of your entrepreneurial energy to the commercial real estate side of things. But meanwhile, I'm like, I was cranking out like $50K like every month or two, like flipping these condos and stuff off the courthouse steps. I was like, well, show me how I can make $50K like every month, like flipping homes, and I'm ready, Corey. But yeah, we had a lot of good times. We actually pitched to redo the shopping mall in Waikiki, the Hawaiian Village. What was it called?
The Hilton Hawaiian Village. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's doing
the one with all the kiosks on Kaimuki. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I see the signs everywhere. I'm like, wow.
He's kind of grown it into like an empire of lots of people, and I was employee number one. Help open the office, order the computers, and hired first employees and everything. Like that was me.
Funny.
Yeah, it's so funny. What startup sector excites you the most?
Well, I guess I remain I don't want to say a sucker, but I'm very excited about kind of impact investing in that whole realm. So whenever I can find a company that's doing something very cool in tech, but also, having a positive impact, people or planet, that's what kind of gets me going. I get really excited about that kind of stuff. I recently joined a nonprofit venture fund called the Sundial Foundation, which is really interesting.
How's that work?
Yeah, exactly. How does that work?
Yeah.
It is itself a nonprofit, but it is making for-profit investments.
Yeah.
And to the extent that
they pay their management fees to cover their expenses, and they give away the carry to the nonprofit.
So there is no 2 and 20 structure. This is just a nonprofit that has donations, right, into the corpus, and then we are making investments out of those donations. And ideally, when we have returns, it'll go back into the foundation and be redeployed. Why are we doing that? Well, we believe that market forces put to work will have a greater impact than the typical kind of nonprofit structure of, in my opinion, putting Band-Aids on things. So, this kind of harnessing
economics and capitalism works, and that's why we kind of have all this stuff, right?
It does. It does. So putting those same principles to work on, businesses that have kind of double bottom line approach.
Yeah. Triple anymore?
Well, whatever.
Okay.
At least double. There's lots of bottom line approach.
People, planet, profit. Yeah.
Quadruple. I don't know. There's another one right around the indigenous issues. So anyway, there's lots of ways to look at it. To me, double would be good enough.
That's really cool. What's one founder from history you wish you could have met?
A founder from history I wish I could have met. I mean, do they have to be dead? I don't know. There's still people out there I haven't met that I would like to meet.
Well, yeah, current. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Paul Graham comes to mind. I just think, what an inspiration for the whole sector. And I've, always followed, his blogs. And I just, think.
Great writer.
Great
writer. For an engineer,
writer.
He's a great writer.
Yeah. Such a, a visionary, and also somebody who's always on point, with opinion. And I have never met him. So that would be cool.
Yeah. I know some founders who have, but I've never met him either.
Yeah.
I was like, say hi to Paul for me.
Yeah.
If you weren't in venture capital, what would you be doing?
I mean, I think I would be doing more of the work of like the Sundial Foundation, I would love to work for a huge foundation that just was giving money away. I think that would be awesome. And, I guess my perspective on that would be to try to put more kind of entrepreneurship and market forces into that type of work, into kind of foundation work. Yeah.
Yep. And then last question, what's the most important trait you look for in a founder?
Yeah. I mean, to me, like this magic combination of vision, right? Like big picture, and combined with the ability to suffer the small things. And I think that's very rare. I've met only a handful of people that I think do that and do it well, meaning they're going to spend all weekend stressing over their spreadsheets and know where every penny is, but also are able to articulate a huge vision and bring people along with them. So that's a pretty rare combination. But when I see that, that's a go for me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure lots of founders and VCs will get a lot of benefit. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, Chenoa.